Final item of business is a members' business debate on motion 20901 in the name of Emma Harper on Eating Disorders Awareness Week 2020. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, so I'd ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now, and I call on Emma Harper to open the debate. Ms Harper, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to lead this evening's debate during Eating Disorders Awareness Week, which runs from the 2nd to the 8th of March. And this year, the focus is on why wait. I'd like to start by thanking colleagues from across the Chamber who have signed my motion. For many years, this debate was proposed by former MSP Dennis Robertson, who has been a real champion of eating disorders and who has undoubtedly played his part in putting the subject on the political agenda. He has been so brave in highlighting his daughter Caroline, who died because of an eating disorder, and I'm aware Dennis will be listening to the debate today. I particularly thank both the Scottish Eating Disorders Interest Group, SEDIG, and BEAT, who are represented here in the public gallery this evening. Emma Broadhurst from BEAT has been extremely helpful in preparing for the debate and has asked for members to gather for a photo call, whoever's speaking who can attend, after the debate this evening. Both charities do a fantastic work day in, day out, supporting those affected by eating disorders to support their loved ones and their families as well. Presiding Officer, around 1.25 million people across the UK are currently living with an eating disorder, and this number is on the increase. Figures show that in 2018-19, around 726 people in Scotland alone were treated for an eating disorder, compared to 436 in 2008-9. While it is welcome that more people are receiving treatment, it is of course concerning that more people are now presenting with eating disorders. It is therefore right that the Scottish Government is taking this issue seriously and has introduced a range of measures to allow for quicker treatment of eating disorders, and I'll touch base on that later. Presiding Officer, the definition of an eating disorder is when someone develops an unhealthy attitude towards food. This can take over their life and make them very ill. Eating disorders come in various forms, from anorexia, where people try to keep their weight as low as possible by not eating and even over-exercising, to bulimia, where people can lose control and eat a lot of food in a very short amount of time and then make themselves vomit, purging what has been consumed. A very dangerous eating disorder is diabulimia. This occurs when people with type 1 diabetes, and I'm one of those type 1 diabetics, it's when type 1s deliberately omit their insulin and control their weight. This is very dangerous, as elevated blood glucose, which can lead to ketoacidosis, is extremely dangerous. I congratulate Diabetes Scotland on their work on this and would encourage anyone interested to have a look at their advice and support. The key symptoms of these disorders include excessively worrying about weight and body shape, avoiding social situations where food may be involved, frequently visiting the toilet after meals and returning looking flushed, and not being upfront about the food the person may be consuming. It is important for family members, friends and colleagues to be aware of these telltale signs. Eating disorders are complex disorders, and this can be influenced by many factors. Research has shown that there is a link between eating disorders and depression, low confidence and low self-esteem. Research carried out by many different universities and other groups continues to point to the relationship between social media and eating disorders, particularly among young people. Social media sites allow young people the opportunity to connect with others in multiple platforms and venues, which is great as it allows communication to be made, as well as the sharing of ideas, knowledge and information. However, I'm sure members will be aware social media can also be a dangerous platform for hate and discrimination. Seeing dieting ads or frequently being exposed to images that may provoke body image concerns can be damaging and dangerous to young people. These ads and posts may in some cases lead to young people developing an eating disorder and puts many others into the at-risk category. Social media interactions are often an extension of an adolescent's life, so being aware of online safety and the issues that young people today may be facing online is so important for families and friends. And I would ask the Scottish Government to keep this in mind when overseeing the development of any proposed guidance. Presiding Officer, I was pleased to hear the announcement this week from the Scottish Government that eating disorder services will be subject to a national review designed to assess and improve support for people living with an eating disorder. The review is set to publish its findings in spring next year, with the aim of providing a full picture of the current support available for those with an eating disorder. It will then inform several recommendations. It will offer several recommendations to inform improvement work throughout 2021. The review forms part of a programme of work to improve performance in mental health waiting times and to support early interventions in community settings and across the third sector, local government and the NHS. Work in the review will last for 6 months and will commence following the publication of the Mental Welfare Commission's report on eating disorder services, which is expected this summer. The MWC report will be used as a solid foundation for the review and for future work on eating disorder support services. And as co-convener of the Mental Health Cross-Party Group, I look forward to continuing to monitor this, and perhaps we will be reviewing eating disorders and the continued work of the government at one of our cross-party group meetings. Recently, I contacted the dietetic team at NHS in Fries and Galloway. The team has a dietitian specifically working with those living with and at risk of developing diabulimia, along with other eating disorders, including anorexia. I was interested to hear that because of the rurality of Dumfries and Galloway, some people who are at risk of developing an eating disorder may not be picked up as easily or may be reluctant to access support because of the travel involved in attending appointments. This is an issue I highlighted in the debate last year, and I'm pleased it is specifically addressed in the new package of support. But again, I ask the Minister to ensure those in hard-to-reach rural areas are supported. I want to briefly mention the Scottish Government's mental health strategy also, and the Children and Young People's Mental Health Task Force, which up until recently was chaired by Dr Catherine Calderwood. The strategy acknowledges the crucial role that the third sector plays in supporting people in providing services and carrying out research, and we need to remember the third sector and how important it can contribute. So I'm therefore pleased to see that all this will form a large part of the review work which is currently being carried out. And in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I'd again like to welcome the opportunity to lead this important debate, and I look forward to hearing from other members this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Harper. I call Angela Constance, to be followed by Alexander Stewart. Ms Constance, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking my colleague Emma Harper for securing this very important debate tonight, acknowledging that this indeed is Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and also the stark reality that more people lose their lives from eating disorders than any other psychiatric condition. And as the chair of the Eating Disorders faculty at the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Scotland, Dr Stephen Anderson, said, eating disorders are the most deadliest and lethal of mental health conditions, and we know that early intervention saves lives. And it is imperative to shine a light on the work that is being done, but also the work that needs to be done, not just this week, but week in, week out, to improve quick access to the right treatment at the right time, remembering always that recovery is possible. And I was really encouraged by the Minister's announcement this week that there will be a thorough but speedy review of eating disorder services, a crucial first step to a new programme of action to improve services for those living with an eating disorder. And there is a growing recognition in the development of public services that changes need to be rooted in the evidence and testimony of those with lived experience. We have seen this in new approaches to tackling homelessness and in building a new social security system from the ground up. And eating disorder services should be no different. Therefore, I want to share with the Chamber the experience of a young constituent of mine and her family. Molly is 16, she's very bright. Her parents are very proud of Molly and her individuality, and she's an exceptional young woman. And Molly's mum, Lorraine, came to see me last week and gave me a heart-wrenching account of diligent and persistent attempts by devoted parents over the course of a year to try and get Molly help. There were lots of deeply concerning signs about anxiety and depression, regular attendance at the GP, being passed from pillar to post, lack of treatment options, and while some responses were more positive than others, decisions were made about Molly by people who had never met her. There was poor communication from services and a lack of connectivity between the different services. Thankfully, Molly was eventually seen by a psychiatrist in December, just in time, because Molly had to be admitted to hospital because her organs were shutting down due to anorexia. And Lorraine, Molly's mum, describes her devastation and her anger at her daughter's life being put in danger due to what she describes as an absolute failure of systems. And all Lorraine wants at the end of the day is for us to do better by our bairns. And any service provider or decision maker would do well to listen to Lorraine's experience as a mum having to battle with the system. And I've written to the Minister following a very helpful conversation that she had with me last week. I've asked her to meet with Lorraine, and I know the Minister will want to identify how and the best way for those with lived experiences for that testimony to be at the very heart of the service review. I want to end, Presiding Officer, just by making 3 very quick points. We have a journey yet to travel to deliver on the principle of ask once, get help fast. We need to get really serious about how we can meaningfully support parents and carers, especially if intensive home-based treatments are to be developed, which I very much hope they are. And if funded, I think there are great opportunities for the voluntary sector to help improve the breadth, the depth and the connectivity of our services. So thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and thank you to the Minister for her conversation last week. I have written to her and I know she'll be responding to me very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Alexander Stewart to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm delighted to be able to contribute this evening to Emma Harper's Business Members' Debate and congratulate her on bringing it to the Chamber. As we've already heard, from the 2nd to the 8th of March is Eating Disorder Awareness Week. As we already know, there are about 1.25 million individuals in the UK who suffer from an eating disorder of some type. And we have heard that Scotland is having a worrying increase. And I look forward to hearing what the Minister will be saying about that during her contribution, because I'm aware of the situation that she has tackling so far, and I think a review is a good way to go forward to try and manage the situation. These conditions are a serious mental illness and can do and devastate individuals and families. And sadly, as we've already heard, there's an increasing high mortality rate. This time last year, I was very vocal in taking part in this Awareness Week when we did have at the Scottish Parliament Beat's new campaign, Socket to the Eating Disorders, which was an excellent opportunity to provide that facility in the public gallery and in our own building here. The awareness recognises and combats the myths and misunderstandings which surround eating disorders like anorexia, bulimia, binge eating and others. In recent years, the MSPs in this chamber have had the opportunity to increase the potential profile of eating disorders, and tonight is another opportunity for us to do that. There is much that we can do to ensure everyone affected by an eating disorder in Scotland gets the chance and the help they need by tabling written or oral parliamentary questions to ministers, and by ensuring that individuals within our own constituencies and regions like NHS leaders have that. We've heard the link between eating disorders and social media, and we must be live to the whole concept of body image and the risks that individuals put themselves in. But one shocking statistic, Deputy Presiding Officer, is that the average individual will wait sometimes for 149 weeks before they decide, when they have a disorder, that they go and seek some help and support. And that we have to assist and ensure that individuals get that support and assistance much quicker. The Scottish Eating Disorder Interest Group, Diabetes Scotland, BEAT and the NHS all provide vital support to individuals who have or are at risk of developing an eating disorder. But they are under continued pressure and support is ensured that these vulnerable individuals are looked after. The value of these organisations' support and assistance, especially through the delivery of a nationwide peer support service for young people living with eating disorders, is well understood, and the support that families get. But in a recent YouGov survey conducted by Eating Disorder Awareness Week, it was recognised that more than 1 in 3 adults in the UK who gave an answer to the survey could not name any signs or symptoms of eating disorders. And sadly, that still stands today with the reality. So we have to ensure that that message is reinforced. It is also known that over and sooner than someone seeks to treatment, and treatment's vitally important, because acknowledging you have that issue and having that problem should be that we have to get the message across to give individuals that faith and that hope. We must ensure that we empower people to take action no matter how long the symptoms have been presenting. So in conclusion, Deputy Presiding Officer, eating disorders are a terrible situation for any individual of any age to have to suffer. And I'm very keen to ensure that no matter what campaign is active at any time, we must ensure that the message gets out to as many people as possible, as often as possible, whenever it is possible, that they require to have that support and assistance to thrive and survive these disorders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr Stewart. I call Kenneth Gibson, followed by David Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I congratulate my colleague Emma Harper on securing this important debate. This is an issue I've long campaigned on, bringing forward a members' debate to the Chamber in February 2008. And my former colleague Dennis Robertson led on this issue with great passion in the 5 years that he served in this Chamber, and I'm delighted that Emma Harper has now picked up the cudgels. In 2009, I lodged a motion noting concerns about the proliferation of pro-anorexia websites, which portray anorexia as a glamorous lifestyle choice rather than a potentially fatal psychiatric illness. More than a decade later, these sites still exist. They share tips on how to accelerate weight loss and disguise fasting from concerned friends and family, as well as advise on how best to induce vomiting and use laxatives. Pro-anorexia websites reach a wide audience, aimed particularly at young women. If we're serious about protecting people from eating disorders, we must not only monitor dangerous pro-ana sites. I would echo calls from charities such as Beat for social media platforms to act and ensure that content promoting conditions such as anorexia cannot be posted. Last year, a study by Youth Works Consulting, which works with schools and local authorities, revealed that eating disorders had overtaken cyberbullying as the top source of online concerns among 10 to 16-year-olds. While figures for cyberbullying have remained virtually static since 2014, those for eating disorders have risen steeply. The data also showed that the number of young people viewing pro-anorexia sites increases dramatically through the teenage years, from 22% of 12-year-olds to 44% of 15-year-olds. These numbers are both deeply disturbing and completely unacceptable. We estimate that around 1.25 million people in the UK have an eating disorder, and it's clear that such disorders are reaching epidemic proportions. Anorexia is the highest mortality of any psychiatric disorder for medical complications associated with illness, as well as suicide. Meanwhile, bulimia is associated with severe medical complications and binge eating. Sufferers often experience medical complications associated with obesity. In every case, an eating disorder affects the quality of life, often not only of the sufferer, but also those who care for them. It's important to treat these conditions as early as possible, not when weight is critically low. Family members of those who suffer from eating disorders often believe their doctor was not well informed. Greater education of the medical profession is required if we're not to have people turned away because their weight is not yet low enough, as has happened in the past. Specifically, how to diagnose and treat eating disorders must be taught appropriately and assessed at all Scottish medical schools. The topic of eating disorders is generally overlooked in medical training, with severe consequences for the prognosis and safety of patients. For example, on average, just 1.8 hours is spent on teaching about eating disorders in medical schools, and in 1 in 5 in the UK, they do not provide any teaching at all. The result is a patchy service and inadequate treatment of sufferers. Each of Scotland's junior doctors should gain clinical experience during their foundation training. Eating disorders are often hidden away from society, and I'm therefore pleased by the Scottish Government's recent announcement that eating disorder services will be subject to a national review designed to assess and improve support for people living with such a disorder. At a time and in a society where much revolves around unrealistic physical representations on TV and social media, it can be tempting for girls, boys and adults to negatively change their behaviour to conform to some body image stereotype. For others, eating disorders are a manifestation of deep-rooted internal issues, trauma or depression. Anyone can be impacted by an eating disorder, which tend to creep up on people, some of whom are not even aware of their relationship with food as unhealthy and that they have a disorder. Presiding Officer, Eating Disorders Awareness Week plays a vital part in focusing attention to the causes, symptoms and solutions to these conditions, and I'm always keen to support it. I look forward to the publication of the Government's review in spring next year and recommendations to inform improvement work throughout 2020 and 21.
Thank you very much. And I call David Stewart to be followed by David Torrance. Mr Torrance is the last speaker in the open debate. Mr Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And could I also start by commending Emma Harper and bringing this vitally important topic to the Chamber this evening, especially as we've heard during Eating Disorders Awareness Week. As we've heard already, the number of people living with eating disorders in the UK is over 1.25 million. It's a mental health crisis that disproportionately affects our young people, women and girls. And eating disorders respect no boundaries and have no heed at all for status or position. Diana, the late Princess of Wales, spoke publicly about these issues in her battles with bulimia and self-mutilation in 1994. And if I can quote, Presiding Officer, she said at the time, "I am certain the ultimate solution lies with the individual, but with the help and patient nurturing given by professionals, family and friends, people suffering eating disorders can find a better way of coping with their lives." And as we all know, Princess Diana fought to increase understanding of bulimia and helping bring public awareness to eating disorders. But the numbers that I referred to earlier are just estimates, as diagnosis is often delayed or missed entirely. And anorexia has the highest mortality rate, again as we've heard earlier, out of any mental illness. There is an average of 3.5 years between the onset of an eating disorder and the start of the treatment, and this is often due to problems with identification, but also because of delays in referral and the longer waited times in an already under-resourced and overburdened NHS. But family and friends of people with eating disorders are all too often bearing the brunt of this, with them offering valuable help to aid recovery, but also taking on high levels of psychological distress and their own emotional weight. Their need of help and support in order for them to be fully empowered to help their loved one through the crisis. This is echoed in the theme of this year's Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and the charity Beat, and I welcome again those in the gallery today from Beat, who do outstanding work in supporting all those affected, as well as raising awareness, are looking at better ways to support the friends and family members. So the support of friends, families and neighbours are absolutely key in enabling someone to overcome an eating disorder, but it should not come at the cost of their mental health as well. Beat's 8 steps for best practice guidance on the engagement and empowerment of families and carers affected by eating disorders is a rallying call to arms for healthcare professionals to adopt in order to best support everyone involved. So I'm proud to have signed up and pledged my support to stand with Beat this week to call for the best care, support and information for people with eating disorder and their friends and family. As I mentioned earlier, the long gaps between the onset of an eating disorder and the start of the treatment is often too long and can impede recovery, as early support is highly beneficial in terms of long-term recovery. According to Beat, and I quote, "The Scottish 10-year mental health strategy details a commitment to deliver on the principle of ask once, get help fast. Yet this is far from a reality for many people in Scotland with an eating disorder. Even once diagnosis has been given, it's a postcode lottery in the kind of care that a patient receives. An FOI that Beat submitted just last year showed that one NHS health board doesn't have an adult eating disorder service. Only one provides day patient services, and one can only treat those with severe anorexia nervosa. But this is inevitable when so little time and resource is spent on training medical staff. 1 in 5 medical schools don't provide any training at all, and those that do, only an average of 1.8 hours is spent teaching this issue. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, the National Eating Disorder Week, let's join together to support the call for better care for people with eating disorders, better care for the family, friends and carers around them who are also affected, and say, no matter where you are, you're on the road to recovery, we support you.
Thank you very much. And I call David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like first to thank Emma Harper for securing this debate in Parliament. Today we raise awareness on a national issue that is estimated to affect 1.25 million people in the United Kingdom. It is an issue that is rarely ever discussed in our open spaces because of a societal stigma which renders those affected unable to recognise their illness or unable to voice their struggles. Eating disorders are a medical illness. They are serious, can be fatal and can affect anyone. Whether or not you are personally affected by an eating disorder, this week is to become better, more considerate and informed. Our empathy and understanding can be life-saving for those with anorexia, bulimia, binge eating and other specified feeding or eating disorders. Organisations such as BEAT and Scottish Eating Disorder Interest Group have been tremendous resources in demystifying the complexities of the illness. We are able to understand more about eating disorders despite not having any reason to know about it outside or what is shown in the media. The media has portrayed a particular type of story about who gets eating disorders, what causes them and what the symptoms are. Although the media can open up the public to more understanding, it perpetuates a certain stereotype that only young females are affected. It does not reflect the full spectrum of the issues at hand. According to BEAT, eating disorder stereotypes make the illness even harder to spot among older people, men and boys, and ethnic and cultural minority groups. Inaccurate depictions of eating disorders can cloud the reality of all demographics may be facing. Diabetes Scotland founded a campaign after noticing the lack of emotional and mental health support for people with diabetes. Because diabetes and food are closely linked, having diabetes can lead to an unhealthy hyper-focus on food, but lead to some people feel negatively about their diet, weight and body image. Most do not recognise the emotional impact that diabetes can have, which can possibly lead to an eating disorder. Diabetes UK reported that patients have felt that they can't get the emotional and mental health support they need. Mitigating these frustrations can be something we can all take part of as a community. The Mental Health Foundation found that 1 in 3 people with eating disorders said they had experienced stigma or discrimination in the workplace, and more than 80% said they didn't feel their employers were informed about eating disorders or how to handle them. These reports highlight just how highly stigmatised eating disorders are. People are reluctant to talk to someone because they feel the disorder isn't serious enough, fear they will worry people or waste their time, or because they feel guilty or ashamed. Our dialogue and conservations can break the stigma which often acts as a barrier to recovery. NHS Fife has 2 incredible programmes to help those of all ages deal with eating disorders. Fife Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service established Scotland's first intensive therapy service in 2002 and has diagnosed approximately 50% of children and young people seen by ITS with an eating disorder. They provide high levels of therapeutic support for young people and their families. NH5 also has a very lucky to have an anorexic nervosa intensive treatment team, which is made up of a small multidisciplinary professional consisting of a psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, a dietitian, assistant clinical psychologist, and a team administrator. NHS Fife is committed to continuing their support and treatment of all who present with eating disorder. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, in order for people with eating disorders to feel safe enough to disclose their pain, we need our understanding, compassion and acceptance. In light of this week, I encourage everyone to prioritise their mental health and treat it with urgency. You deserve to have your concerns acknowledged respectively, to be taken seriously and to be supported in the same way as if affected by any other illness.
Thank you very much. And I call Claire Hawkey to close the Scottish Government Minister, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am pleased to respond on behalf of the Scottish Government. And it's right that we hold this debate each year to mark Eating Disorder Awareness Week. It allows us to raise awareness about eating disorders and the terrible impacts that they can have, not only on those who are diagnosed, but their family and friends too. And I want to acknowledge a few people in particular for their work to continue to raise the profile of this devastating illness. Firstly, I want to thank Emma Harper for lodging the motion and for continuing to focus minds on how important this subject is. This includes her continued work to raise awareness of eating disorders in relation to diabetes and to draw our attention to the important work that Diabetes Scotland does to help people who have or are at risk of developing an eating disorder. As I mentioned last year, I want to continue to honour our former colleague Dennis Robertson. Dennis opened many of these debates in the past, and I want to assure him that we will continue to fight for the right help and support to be available across Scotland. I also want to thank BEAT, who continue to campaign tirelessly to raise awareness for eating disorders and to provide guidance and support for those with an eating disorder and their family and friends. I know that representatives from BEAT are here in the gallery this evening, and I hope that they are heartened by the cross-party interest here. Lastly, I want to extend my thanks to those across the country that work day in and day out to improve the lives of those with an eating disorder and their families. I visited NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde on Monday to mark the start of this Awareness Week and to announce the Government's commitment to a national review of eating disorder services, which I will return to later in my speech. I was really moved and also inspired by what I heard during that visit. I spoke with young people and their families to hear about the support that they had received from Connect ED service. Two things were very clear. First, the life-changing impact that our NHS staff can have on young people and their families. And second, the fact that recovery from eating disorders is possible. This was a common theme throughout the visit. Even when things are at their darkest, the right help and support can make the world of difference. Last year's debate focused on tackling discrimination and breaking down the stereotypes associated with eating disorders, and many of the MSPs who contributed this evening in Chamber also contributed to that debate. As I outlined last year, eating disorders do not discriminate, and anyone can be affected by them. They're serious illnesses that can change the lives of not just those directly impacted by them, but those who care and support for them too. Which is why the theme of this year's Awareness Week is incredibly important. This year, BEAT are raising awareness of eating disorders and the support that they can provide to anyone affected. In particular, they want to highlight the impact that eating disorders have on family, friends, and everyone that cares for those with an eating disorder. As we have already heard in this debate, there are approximately 1.25 million people in the UK living with an eating disorder. However, there are many more lives impacted by each individual illness, and it's crucial to recognise this. BEAT want to highlight that people with eating disorders are much more likely to recover with the support of family and friends. However, we need to ensure that those supporting individuals with an eating disorder are also provided with the appropriate support and information themselves. And this was another of the recurring themes that I heard during my visit to Connect ED on Monday, the power of peer support, especially for parents who brought up time and time again. Knowing that someone else is going through the same thing can be transformative, and the families I spoke to their only wish that there had been more of it available. And this is one of the reasons why we committed to an expansion of NHS Lothian and BEAT's National Digital Peer Support Service for those with an eating disorder last year. And we also launched ECHO, a telephone coaching service for parents and carers. Both support services, through hundreds of hours of telephone support and emails over the past year, have ensured that young people and their parents and carers are being provided with the support and guidance that they require. Presiding Officer, I mentioned the Scottish Government's commitment to the National Review of Eating Disorder Services earlier. This is a game-changing piece of work that I hope is supported by everyone across this chamber. We will build on the work of the Mental Welfare Commission, who are currently conducting themed visits of eating disorder services across Scotland. And the Mental Welfare Commission will be publishing its report in summer this year. And this will include a review of adult services, CAMS, outpatient, NHS and independent eating disorder care in Scotland. And following the publishing of that report, we will begin our 6-month review, which will be independently led, and it will cover eating disorder services for both adults and young people from the age of 12 upwards. It will conduct a needs assessment of the services that are provided by the third sector and community eating disorder support across Scotland. And it will make recommendations for best practice structure for specialist eating disorder services in urban, semi-urban and rural areas. And it will make recommendations for what the age limit, if any, of the eating disorder service should be. And we will make a further announcement about who will lead the review in due course. Our ambition is for the review to inform a second phase of investment and improvement work following its publication in early 2021. Just to mention some of the excellent contributions that we've heard this evening, Presiding Officer, and Emma Harper raised the issue of social media, and we will be publishing social media and screen time guidance in the coming weeks, which has been developed by young people for young people, and this advice includes the impact that social media can have on young people's body images. Angela Constance gave a very moving and concerning account of her constituents' experience of services, and indeed she has written to me, and I will in due course write back to her. But can I also say to Angela Constance, on the back of what I heard from parents and carers on Monday at Connect ED and from her constituents' experience, I've also undertaken to write to the Royal College of GPs to discuss how that we can work together to raise awareness in primary care settings of eating disorders, signs and symptoms, and diagnosis and treatment. Alexander Stewart gave a very considered contribution, and Kenneth Gibson spoke of his passion of raising awareness of eating disorders over many years. And David Stewart gave us a very important lesson in the recognising the contribution of families and carers and friends in the recovery process, a very pertinent one. And I thank David Torrance also for his very measured contribution and for his congratulations of the fine work that's being done in his local NHS board. Presiding Officer, I will close by again thanking Emma Harper, Beat, and everyone else who is involved in campaigning for the right help and support to always be available for anyone affected by eating disorders. And I can assure you that you have this government's full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting.